in public meeting today. Just on the back of that, members of the public, staff members are welcomed at our board because we want to see more of that, and we do welcome the public to come and give an attendance to these meetings. If staff or public or governors do attend, they are permitted to ask questions at the meetings, and I will invite the questions at the end of the meeting rather than during the meeting, and also the questions have to be relevant to the items that have been received and that have been discussed on the agenda today. So they can't actually be just random questions that you would like to ask. And obviously, just to let you know, and it's not to be rude or anything like that, but as chair, I may interrupt or stop a question being asked where I don't feel it's relevant to the matters at the meeting, or it discloses some kind of confidential information. You can actually submit your questions prior to the meeting, which we would welcome because it gives ourselves and the execs an opportunity to ensure that we give a thorough, detailed response to your question. And usually that's probably about many days, about seven or between 7 to 10 days prior to the board meeting. And then we do have a limitation on the number of questions that are allowed. So we don't allow you to ask a whole raft of questions. There are some limitations. There are no limits to questions, obviously, that governors can ask. So just wanted to point that out. So if we go to the agenda, and apologies for absence, if there are any apologies for any absences. It's yeah, Sarah. So just Sarah, is anybody else who's any declaration of interests in relation to matters being discussed on the agenda today? Okay, and so minutes of the previous meeting. If we take the minutes of the previous meeting, can I just ask, are there any points of accuracy, Dave?
There's just one on the first page. It talks about this managing director versus director. So we just change that.
Yes, we can just change managing director to director.
And there's a repetition of a paragraph on page 9 in the March, where it says March. It was disappointing to note there's 2 paragraphs starting with that.
Great. And it's only a minor typo on page 13. Page 13, 9.41. It's got right at the bottom there. It's got T chair, and it should just say the chair. It's just not TH. So, are there any other points of accuracy or any omissions that people want to point out in relation to the minutes, or can we accept them as a true reflection?
Sorry, it's not automatic.
At present. No,
Give us the okay, so my apologies, not doing that. I'm on this one, I wasn't at. Yeah.
yes, this one.
Yeah.
Your apologies, we received and received
Yeah,
apologies.
Oh.
And you know, well,
We won't notice that. That's what he's noting.
yes. Thank you, thanks, Monica. Any other points in relation to the minutes? Okay, no. So if we then move to the matters arising and the action log, and on there, you've got the Governor's Action Plan 6-month review will be updated at the April 23 meeting and scheduled for June. Scheduled to be completed in June and not necessarily to arrive at the
No, I think we've got that for the next board meeting. Yeah, we've got that coming for the next board meeting.
Okay. So we move over to the chair's report. And the report is then not actually going to go through line by line, but obviously if you've had a chance to read it and see what I've been involved in over the past month and a half or so, and you want to ask me any questions, you've got the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, I've just accept the report as read. Yeah. So, you want to chief executive?
Chief Officer, I'll do the pieces and then I'll pass over to the list of other people. So I'll again also take the report as read. There were just a few things that I wanted to highlight and elaborate on. Other people, I obviously talked about our approach to industrial action. So the one taken as far there is industrial action, and again the extreme for the 17th. And we are taking the same approach that we have up until this point, because that has, I think, worked for everyone involved. It's seen as appropriate. And thank you to everybody who is busy now organising to make sure that we've got potential cover and should we need it for those that want to take industrial action. The only other couple of items I wanted to highlight were particularly around, from a sustainability point of view, around our financial position and our performance. Obviously, we're stating in this paper that we have thankfully received considerable amount of investment for mental health services. We know that that isn't the case within the country, and we are working in an integrated care system that is very committed to allocating those funds that are not to mental health services. So I would like to acknowledge that. Of course, whilst that investment is there, we aren't going to be without financial challenges in the coming years. And a considerable amount of work is going on with our colleagues in Birmingham and Solihull to think about some of the transformative journey might look like, as well as some of the transactional pieces that we could do more easily together, perhaps even provide an increase in quality of those services, but that might also have a byproduct of financial efficiency. So quite a bit of work is going on around those, particularly in the areas that that we will be familiar with, so things like reducing our spending and reliance on things like agency. Also thinking about how we can better align and integrate some of the services that we all independently have and run, that we could do more effectively by a single approach to. Also wanted to mention in that vein that we're doing a significant amount of work around, so we've had a chief executives, chief people officers, as well as chief executives and chief finance officers, kind of workshop in the last few weeks, to look both at the financial aspects that I've just discussed, but also to look at our workforce challenges. And we are meeting with the chief people officers on tomorrow actually, to do another session with them around what delivering plan could look like for us. So we're all, as an individual organisation, we're all aiming to achieve the same things. We're all aiming to improve the same things, and there is a lot to be gained by students. Some elements of the majority of those living together. So just wanted to highlight those. Obviously, the paper talks also in that section about the areas where performance is significantly outlined for us, and there's a theme of that in our papers today. Really just want to acknowledge that we have got significant work being undertaken, particularly around things like improving the urgent care pathway. That includes and also thinking about how we improve and increase the level of therapy that we've got available. To name just two, but people are very well. There's that thematic that we've got our papers about performance in those particular areas needing to be addressed. I just wanted to connect to everybody the 10-year strategy that is a link in the paper, that we were heavily involved in that. One of our clinical directors. That's Sal took a lead role for us in terms of engaging people in the organisation and supporting the work to develop that. So we were heavily involved in that. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things on the quality one in terms of our own organisation, the fact that since we got met, we have submitted our detailed action plan in response to the CQC inspection report. And a significant number of actions within there, many of which are already underway, and some of which are timelines that, all of which are timelines that we think are achievable. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I wanted to just make a point in public of congratulating our Birmingham City Council Children's Trust colleagues for the huge attainment. I mean, it's such a significant attainment and it's so great for the people of Birmingham to finally in a situation where their children's services are seen as good and people are coming here to find out how it's done. So, a huge achievement. And I'll pass over to Vanessa.
Thank you. A couple of things for me just to pull out in the services. I think a good start is just to note how proud all the teams and the services were around the value awards that they received. They're still really upbeat and buoyant about it and talking about their applications for next year. So I think we're going to be absolutely inundated. So it's really, really good event. So I think it's important to note that the staffing challenges continue, and there's a note from each of the divisions around that. They continue to work creatively, trying to cover shifts and look sort of very creative like that. Vanessa said, above and beyond sort of a normal nursing post, what can we do differently? So that continues. Under ICCR, which is our integrated community care recovery services, just want to note that the work we're doing around our ADHD services, and we're part of a wider BSOL piece of work now, which is really taking part in that, and actually it's growing by the day. There was a workshop that we attended on the 15th, the same week. It was Emma Broken, one of our service managers from ICCR. She attended and represented the organisation to do some work around, what's our current position, what would we have as a single model approach, and then doing some action planning. So it's great to be part of our BSOL system, looking at ADHD and the wider sort of impact on caseloads, waiting lists, because we know it's a fundamental shortfall in our BSOL system. So we're working together to address that. So when more work comes out, and we can just report that here or through our quality. Also important to note around the prioritisation around these skills and engagement with staff in ICCR, with listening up events, really working well. So that continues based on our staff survey. In secure and offender health services, again, it's important to acknowledge the flexibility around staffing, and massive thanks to our ward managers, matrons, and our OT psychologists who've been working numbers when staffing their numbers to be low, but actually, working like across as MDTs to support our service users and keep services safe. On to secure services and RD. I just wanted to note the Women's Service hosted a successful conference in the National Arboretum, which was really well attended. So I had a conversation with Emma just to say, how did it go? Again, still really buoyant and upbeat from the day. She was sort of saying, got national recognition now for the work they're doing around the blended model and the blended service, and really acknowledged the positive impact and the input from service users. She also said now, we always used to look at about, around the country, good practice, people are coming to her now, it's the team around good practice to share that. So she feels like there's a real shift. And we were just arguing, we saying it was we charged our partners and wider to attend an event. So she's really proud that she can generate it. So she's going to be bigger and bolder next year around that. But really, really fantastic events and really great to showcase the work that they're doing. So I wanted to really acknowledge Emma Watts for the work she's done as our service manager there. Going on to acute and urgent care. Again, lots and lots of work doing there, and as Roisin has mentioned, our urgent care pathways under real strains at the moment. but lots of work, lots of efforts, lots of focus going into supporting our out of area. Services are placed out of area to prevent people going from out of area with the wider pathways in the office. Again, just to draw the board's attention to the work that we're doing around sensory assessments and autism training for our staff and the wards. And again, I want to name check Henry Fletcher. She's our head of nursing and advanced nurse practitioners, who's leading this work in acute and urgent care. She's been leading the training, and she's also attending a lot of individual meetings within the system to help and support people with autism and learning disability. So I think it's important to note that. Going on just a little bit around calls to people in convey, we sort of implemented a different sort of way of working with street triage, so as opposed to taking service users directly to A&E. We've got a call before you convey, so we're speaking to the ambulance staff. Do they need to go to A&E? Can we bring them into PDU? Can we think of another pathway? That seems to be working really well. They're doing an evaluation at this moment in time, so we'll bring some of the figures through to our FTP and quality committee, because it's a really, really good range way of that with working. So we're very proud of that also. In conventional frailty, a few things just to note here, just again, changes around some new posts that the teams are bringing in, particularly one around a discharge manager, working with some of our service users that are placed in residential homes, but also in other step-down services that are not specifically for mental health, but for people with dementia and older frailty complications or support that they need. It's a dedicated post that we're going to create to help support this pathway, and also note around the general nurse and occupational posts as well as part of that. They've been developed as part of that, and different way of thinking around workforce. Important to note about the bipolar service has been shortlisted for the HSJ Awards, so I want to bring that out here. And also the new posts that we're bringing into the talking therapist service, which are our senior employment advisors, working with people who are off sick in different work environments, reaching in, working with them around supporting them to come back to work. So that's a new initiative, and we've had some investment to support that. I just wanted to finish and acknowledge Birmingham Pride event, which some of us, Patrick and I, attended, and lots of others from across the organisation. And a big call out to Debbie Boll, who then has helped facilitate and helped us, be part of the NHS march. What's the march some people call it, or as the procession, and represented the NHS there, which is really great, fantastic event. So really proud to have been part of that. And again, keep bigger involved in next year. We probably need more of us here, so to reach out for board members to represent us. That would be really good, and other staff in the organisation as well. So I think I'll leave it there. There's been lots of positive into that, did you notice? Yeah.
Thanks, Vanessa and Rashid. So in relation to the Chief Exec's report, are there any questions?
So I'm not sure whether it's Roisin or Vanessa, but I thought it was very interesting to see that there's both BSOL and regional work around ADHD going forward, which I would absolutely support 100%. What I'm wondering is, what's the timeline for that piece of work? When would we start? It's such an important thing for families and the development of children, but also for some adults that are, undiagnosed. And so what the timeline is, and how the broader partners, i.e. education, are being actively involved in some of that, because they're often some of the people who can identify some of those issues first early on.
I mean, but that's to respond particularly about, she's closer to the running and solid operations. I think is probably where the kind of thing about education and about the regional work, why we put it on that agenda.
Yeah. So I mean, there's lots of providers that deliver ADHD services, and I will say we haven't worked that well together. I think the workshop of the 15th really sort of a bit of a penny dropping, that we're all, when I was speaking to Emma and looking at sort of the actions that came out, all acknowledging that we're all struggling to meet the needs of service users with ADHD, and quite sort of obviously really sort of a bit of a wake-up call around the waiting lists as well that we all have. So, I mean, the plan is to come together to have one model, one single point of access, because at the moment service users go all over.
Yeah.
There is a inconsistent offer and approach. And I think working with our GPs is also key as well, where some of the services, some of our organisations don't get that support and that offer from a GP perspective, you know, that joint sharing and understanding. So I think the timelines around that, so the workshop on the 15th of May, I think they probably want it to happen tomorrow, you know, so I think what they're doing is working a plan. From what I can see from the outputs, I can't see a plan in there of when actually we will be seeing the difference, but I know we're actually working on caseloads and thinking of different ways of supporting caseloads. So I think what I need to do is get more of an outcome from that workshop, I think, with what those timelines would be. I think this has been such a long standing issue, but I think it's going to take some time. But I think also, say time in that we do need to actually address the needs of people with ADHD. So I don't have a defined sort of timeline of when it would all be done, and but I think we can bring something back and that's a bit more sort of robust around that.
I mean, to be honest, I think just some quick wins will be welcome by
Agree. I think that's
population of
yes,
of carers and service users.
yeah,
So starting to see some working together
yeah.
more effectively in the way, and as you say, it's a very disparate offer,
It is, and
Across
it's
the
the systems as well.
and it depends where you enter is how well your outcome is. So it shouldn't feel like that.
No,
really.
no.
So you know, just what I would perhaps suggest is trying to get those quick wins in as well, so
Yeah,
that people start to see something happening.
yeah. I can't help thinking that was discussed in detail at the workshop, you know, not being there.
Yeah.
Won't have that detail, but looking at the agenda and what the actual focus was, I think a lot was done in that room, thinking about this single offer.
Right.
But we can take that as an action, maybe bring it through one of the committees around that otherwise work that we're doing in the outcome of that workshop.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
All I wanted to say is that the reasons that you just described are why you put it on the agenda. Because originally it wasn't one of the areas that we were going to work on as a West Midlands governance, and collaborative. But given that actually you're recognising two things. One is that there is this disparity around and this fragmentation. And second is the huge increase in demand. So I think there's going to be a real reality check for all of us as well around, there may well be some quick wins, but there may well also be a really significant piece that we need to do around actually this demand is completely, at the moment, probably outstripping even the ones, even bringing them all together may not be in a position to work that through. So, but you know, I'm surmising when I'm saying that, I think there's a sense that's where we might get to.
Again, I'm not sure who might respond to this, but it's a question triggered by the policy development section, but it's actually more around patient safety, I suppose, that I was thinking. And the question I did pose on convene was, do we have our own trust sexual safety policy and sexual safety lead? And do we record such incidents and monitor the extent of these issues? And I'm aware that CQC were aware of this some years ago and raised concerns about this issue of mental health trust, but there's been a recent Guardian and British Medical Journal investigation that shows that there's still growing levels of sexual activity and sexual abuse in mental health trusts in particular, and it's with both staff and patients as both perpetrators and victims. But the report would suggest that only a quarter of trusts actually have designated policies. And I suppose my anxiety is if we don't have a policy and we don't measure it, do we know the extent of the problem? So that's the question.
I think it's to answer. We do record it. So okay. So BMA and Guardian, there are lots of their data through information and quite a number of them, and we have responded to those. We do have the national.
As it was the CQC, I think it was 2017 that they published the report based on 3 months for investigators and work trusts. they published the guidance in 2018. So since that time, there's been a mental health improvement program that's been set up around this safety collaborative. So from an organisation perspective, we benchmarked ourselves against those standards. And rather than devising policy, our aim is to devise guidance around sexual safety. That's been done in conjunction with people that are doing care for this new ways of sexual safety from a standing perspective. So we've done the benchmark. Actually, this quarter, this quarter, we're going to be producing a policy metrics around it. Looking to develop a quite suite of those policy metrics. So I'm to get back to all of it.
So we'll go through. Yeah, examples, and so we'll see something in few days.
At the end of the course.
Okay.
That's an action. In
Yeah, just a feeling more of a macro question here. You talked about the junior doctor strike, the forthcoming junior doctor strike. The other day, when a lot of the NHS top brass and a few thousand people will be London, Manchester at a conference, what sort of optics do we agree with that? Or screen from us? Because if I was a patient, I'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute. Half the NHS were in Manchester, and including Dr. Johnson.
Well, we certainly won't have half politics, but
That's
so, and that's certainly deliberate consideration for us. We also stood on some medical director meetings for the
Yes. Lydia?
Sorry, I had another question.
Yes, fine.
Which again, Steve has answered on the, it was around the concerns around within the city, the high rates of domestic abuse, and that the sort of response in terms of assessment is not proportionate to the demand. And I know that during the pandemic, that Caring Minds did put in some funding to support us with also some extra capacity in our side. I suppose it's a wide existing issue as well, isn't it?
So as the domestic use margin board looks at I think the creating provide more business assistance. Our own finance, within the same part, so of those training will make sure that stuff we are line up
What about the sort of the wider responses from the other organisations? Are we involved in discussions with them?
Yeah, so we have seen on domestic violence partnership.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One in terms of acute emergency care, and it's referenced there that in April, this is about the 3 rooms in the place of safety within emergency care centres, and in April we saw 80 patients detained under section 136 and brought to Spencer, and that was the lowest since 2022. And we made a point there saying collaborative work is ongoing with police to try and address this matter. Do you feel that the decision that the Met was taking that will be implemented in August will also have an impact on an already area that the uptake is low?
So I'll have to take this. So I think that the evidence from places like Humber, mostly where this action has already been taken, is that we shouldn't do it. So what we should expect to see is a further embedding and alignment around the role of the police versus the role of the and certainly, whilst I think there are issues around the Met Police announcement being made in advance of any joint discussions with the NHS that saw them feeling positive about the implication of it. What we do know, as I said, is that where it has already been implemented, is that it hasn't in fact created some better opportunities for how individuals are supported at the point of need. And so I think, whilst from a headline point of view, you might want to, it will have raised concerns for us on further discussion about the because I think the fact that we have got good relationships with the police, the fact that we now have a governor, police, I think we're well placed to make sure that any move of that nature is going to be undertaken through a really good discussion and understanding this understood perspective.
Brilliant, thank you. And then, talking back on the secure care and offender health, you make mention there that this still remains a challenge of that across probation officers in managing community risk in the event of personality disorder service contracts. And then what we're doing to address that is to come up with creative ways to resolve it. Do you think the creative ways will be sufficient enough to offset the challenges that we've got with probation? What are some of the creative ways?
I think the challenges are sort of, not having a full sort of workforce around probation, actually how we sort of work together. I think there's work around sort of, priority around caseloads, is there other things that we and other organisations we can get involved to support our service users? So I think they're working that through at the moment, Phil. Chair. Working that through at the moment to come together with the solutions around that. So I think it's early days around, if we will be addressing all the gaps and how we can do that better. I think the relationship is much stronger now that we have with probation. And obviously it's an integral part of someone's care and support from our forensic services as well.
And also I'm thinking about managing risk in the community and the reflection that we may have in relation to our service and how much confidence can we give the general public that actually risk is sufficiently being managed. So it's just something for us to be on the radar watching brief, as it were, because it is of a concern. And I guess, I'm sure you do this anyway, I guess we need to up the ante in terms of having regular meetings to satisfy ourselves that they're doing all that they can, as well as we're doing all that we can. It obviously, in the centre of this is the patient, is the service user, but also wider than that is the safety of the public as well. So honestly, from this particular group is really community. So those are the questions that I have. Thank you, Rasheen and Vanessa, for these reports. So we move on then with the agenda and go to the trust strategy, which is Patrick, and documents there for approval.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll take this read is here partly for assurance on delivery of year 2 priorities and also for approval in terms of year 3 goals. Respecting committees will be received and discussed these goals prior to coming to this board. Just to recap, we launched our strategy in April 2021 for the clear strategic priorities. And last year, the recommendation of the board, which is the process of prioritisation and prioritising our annual goals. And this was mainly to ensure that we are addressing any risks set out within our map and also taking into consideration national priorities, for example, delivery of the long-term plan, and also addressing issues that we would think flagged to us through the CQC staff survey and any other forms of intelligence. So the prioritisation process is very clearly laid out in here, where what we do is level 1 goals are reported here in the board, and level 1 and 2 reports through the committees, and the other goals feeding into existing governance within the organisation. So this paper is giving reasonable assurance to the board on the delivery of
goals for 2022-23, and this is based on the fact that we know that there are goals that we haven't progressed. There are 4 goals that are rated as red in the paper, and one of those actually relate to the staff story that we had earlier on today, technical development of USI, and my crop. So it's just the fact that there are the goals that we've not been able to progress.
You've done that one as well. We have heard now from Department of Health that actually have been rejected. So we know we've been waiting 18 months for this, with mostly NHSs. Middle departments in the same situation, so we've also done a bit. So it means that we've got to look at different ways to do that, and we just properly need to know.
So that's those are the goals for 22-23, and in terms of 23-24, goals have been developed through wider engagement with stakeholders within the organisation, and they've been through the committees for approval, and they can actually board for approval for us to progress. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I mean, as you know, I think the structure of this and the process to develop this is excellent. I'm really impressed by the process and the engagement of people through the system. So that's great. In terms of this report specifically, I'm a little bit unclear as to how the discussions in the committees has been reflected here. So, for instance, in people, we had a conversation that said we accept the list of schemes or goals for next year within the people priority. But actually, we were concerned that we thought there was quite a risk around deliverability, and certainly in terms of resource to be able to do that. I suppose in the sense that that should be part of the evolution of the conversation and a risk. I just couldn't quite see it in this report. So I was just wondering how this report is reflecting the discussion of the committees.
Yeah, so I think that accountability around what you're describing and we need to see the committees, because I think there is a risk that we can have conversations in a way that might not seem helping to look how you unlock some of those challenges that we described. So my view is that need to be coming through the assurance reports that we bring into the board as the committee accountability for oversight on the delivery of that strategic priority. What is it that we're asking of the board to be able to deliver those goals? So although yes, your views on the committee are not reflected here, I think the purpose of this was to outline what were the achievements, what were some of the risks, which I think certainly your view is that if there are any constraints, which some of them are reflected in here, but I think specifically around those elements around deliverability, we probably need to do much more as a community to be bringing that in.
Okay, yes.
Can I just add, because I also wonder about whether that's what we need to see reflected in the plan. So that's how I would see us being in a position to say that we think these are the right aspirations and the right goals to have. And the next stage of this is to actually then be thinking about how do we reflect on our and our insurance framework, what the risks for delivery of that.
Yeah, I
So
suppose
see that as the first.
I would entirely agree. Indeed, we have very conversation in both FPP and in people. It's just seeing this as the report. It needs. I suppose what struck me was from a governance point of view. It needed to show the evolution of the governance, having there being a discussion with the committees and what came out of the committees in terms of the evolution of the report and the next itself and expectations. Where then those specific things, the actions such as the discussion in BAF, etc. So it's the nature of the report rather than the content of the report, if you see what I mean. And I just think that might be something that we need to start thinking a little bit more about, reflecting in a public arena the conversations, the impact we have in committee on the development of these pieces of work specifically related to the piece of work, rather than just through the issues report, where it can be slightly compartmentalised potentially. You know, I think I'd be quite keen to see that in future.
So on this occasion, would it be satisfactory for us to really note the fact that actually during committee discussions that the issue of deliverability and the risk associated was raised, and as a board we are clear that the process for that is.
Yeah, that sounds
So if we have that here.
Yeah, no, that'd be absolutely acceptable to me. It's just thinking that through in future.
Go back to you, Mr. Albert.
So picks up on Anne's point somewhat, just in terms of, you know, everything we talked about, sort of the transformative nature of to do here, and how all of the sort of four elements of the strategy piece together to actually then deliver a whole. What I see here at this moment in time is, you know, we launched strategy in 2021, we said that we're going to be at a certain place in 5 years' time or whatever that time period is. And that sort of adds up to an amount of value and improvement. What I can't see here is how far along that journey are we got. So this is year 2 of 5 years, let's say. So have we achieved 40% of that goal? Are we ahead of the game? Are we behind? And where are those risks? And if we are behind, then it was back to that point in terms of, are we being transformational enough in our thinking to actually achieve that 5 years? So I can't see that in there. And it goes from the point that Anne was trying to make. I think it's all very good having those debates in the committees, but unless it's presented as a whole, those conversations could get lost, even though we might be flagging them through back and through the committee. I'm just think, as members of the public would want to see the strategy being presented as a whole, rather than a fragmented story. Potentially.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm just so the discussion we had there was actually to do that properly, you've got to understand the impact. And it's actually how are we going against that impact? How do you measure the impact of it rather than just doing this? This tends to say we're doing things and they are actually intended that we're going to do. We don't measure the impact. So there was quite a lot of discussion, certainly about how we do measure that. That will allow you to far better assess that, because that I think is understanding that goes against. Because unless we can measure the outcome for staff, service users and carers, I don't think we're really showing what it is. That's where, that's where we got into it. Yes, I think it's really important we reflect that. But I think the key thing in this is the impact piece, the impact statement of doing this. Because we can do all this, it doesn't make any difference. Because saves we're wasting time. I don't think we will. We've got to be able to say this is the impact.
On the face of it, there's a lot of great stuff being reported here, but for me, I can't gauge whether that's enough.
Can I just ask if it led to an action? I mean, discuss it in Is it leading to an action?
Yes, yeah, because it was the impact bit around are we doing enough in the clinical services and sustainability to give us sufficient financial sustainability going forward? So that's the example. But that's 2 elements of sort of 4 strands of the strategy, and I think the other 2 strands need to contribute equally. So how do we then integrate all of that together so that we get a combined strategy that we deliver clinical excellence, we deliver patient safety, and we deliver financial sustainability. And that through this, I can't be assured.
So I suppose that's one point about, so what's the action that we've given you? What was the action that was really giving the assurance?
Well, the action is around the elements that we're doing in clinical services and sustainability, whether they are actually giving us enough headroom for the finance team to then to assure FPT that we will not run a deficit, or we won't, we'll as a minimum break even at the end of the year, and we've got, an £8 million hole in the club. Have we got enough horsepower in the strategy to actually give us that?
It's closed under section 27 strategy plans, where it talks about measure impact. So that was very much the action part of it. But it was proposed, before we do that, that does change the way we describe.
But as I said, my point is,
Yeah.
you just can't do it too early.
No, and of course, all our efforts around ensuring we've got financial sustainability are reflected in strategy. They are reflected in some working communities and the system work. So there's something about us also needing to acknowledge that over and above the strategy, there is work that you need to do to enable employment policy, to enable sustainability and financial as well. So I agree with what you're saying about the impact. I think we also need to caveat understanding of that. But the strategy is not, it wasn't designed specifically to create that sustainability across the board, but there are actually certain things that we are needing to.
Yeah, so I think I was going to refer to what they describing on the minutes on page 74. What we described in the committee specifically in 81. Like that, so we describe about and that's why we think that's the report to say we need to be very clear about it. We will measurement and understand its impact. So I don't think in the community we're saying we understand that yes, we need to work on it and bring that back to the community. So I wouldn't expect you to say that you reassure us that we understand it. That's why I don't think you think let's say that's really the correct. And we can look at the overall piece about how cashable are some of these initiatives to respond to a question around efficiencies. We've had those broad conversations though was the additional value of the collaborative and what is it that we need to be doing more of to be able to transform some of our services. And there are some steps that we agree with the faith to the community as we agree in June. It's not about like bringing it up after you have a bag. Then this is how we will achieve some of those ambitions that we want to bring them how we will to understanding that transformation agenda. So that's my understanding of what you need to do. But we have for my colleagues who look at those things.
Okay, so can I just get some, sorry, Mr. Maker, do you want to, on the second point?
No, it's different.
Okay, just on this point, can I just get some clarity in the general consensus then, in terms of what has been presented here for approval? What the next, what you're saying is, if in principle you're approving this, or what you wanted to do is just a reflection, some of the discussions about health.
I think that's right, Chair. Yes. I think this paper really reflects what we received at committee, slices of it, what we received at committee, and it's come to the board as a file, which is fine. But I think there's a value in reflecting the discussion and the contributions that led to made at the committee, and to agree in it.
But we'll have that as just as an action. It's kind of what we're doing. So if we just have that as an action, or to move on from this agenda item, but David Winston as well, with the Paddy's Handbook first.
Yeah. So I wanted to my point, which is slightly different one, which is when you bring it all together, you see the summary of all the goals. You see the different levels of the goals, so there's never one goal going forward. So effectively, this board will use that 600 to and there are 39 goals that we're looking at. And I just wonder whether or not, and this is, and the process of getting here it's fantastic, fabulous, and engagement is fabulous, but I just wonder whether or not we can realistically monitor and check on our 39 goals. That's what I wonder, because in overall terms, not just the report, but across the organisation, there are 97, and I think that's quite ambitious. So it's wonderful for board, and we're strategic and quite focused in what we're looking at, whether or not we're biting up more than we can share with 39 goals. That's my first point. Second bit I just want to do, which will probably come later on when you provide an update in the business plan later on in the year, which is that some of the goals that we've got, which is set out on page 72 of convene, where we talk about the level 1 goals, and it's into the 4 quadrants: people, services, quality, people, and sustainability. Some of those, how measurable some of it's going to be, because we don't want to later on get to, did you achieve it, didn't you achieve it, partially achieved, not partially achieved, and stuff. And I think some are easily measurable. And I think some we could say, well, in which quarter would we expect that to happen? Because I think that will inform the best side of things, but also it will help us about, well, what are the resources we need to have in place to achieve it? Because if some of these are dependent on recruitment of staff or changing something else, I do think that's what would focus it. But overall, my comment is it's a fabulous piece of work. It brings everything together really, really well. It engages a lot of people, but it also, my first point really is it's a challenge to the board as well. Now, how we want and how we seek to achieve 39 quite important goals.
Very true.
I think what's been suggested will enhance it.
So yes, sorry.
It will enhance it.
Yeah.
Patrick, response. Yeah, I think it's also how we maximize on some of these strategic segments that we have as a board, and also obviously keen to do more with the chairs opportunities around this outside of the communities, so we fully understand how we're progressing our strategy. Because I think in terms of the work with NETS, it should be more than just assurance. It's also how do you ensure you bring your expertise in supporting us in delivering the strategy. I totally agree. I know that this day is about do you still integrate your points?
Yeah, I just wanted to indicate that as part of this strategy, ABI is going forward, following comments from the various committees that you attended last week, to look at elements around measuring outcome, to measure the deliverables, which and raised. Also about the impact assessment, which were raised at FPP as well. So there are a lot of pieces of work that are included in the back as well. The board could also decide to have an action around midterm measure of knowing where we are along the journey, midterm. Maybe in 6 months, they may want ABI to come back and tell us where we are along that journey of delivery. And then at the end of the year, they may also want to get ABI come back and tell us where are we at the end of March with delivering the goals we had said. Around the 39 goals, the board can decide to say, okay, we're delegating level 3, level 2 goals to management. We delegate devolving that responsibility to management. And we are focusing on the level 1 goals, which is strategy. We're taking responsibility for overseeing the delivery of those ones, whilst management can oversee the delivery of those operational goals and provide us assurance and accountability.
Yeah, that's part of the concept. Yeah, and we can take those back as an action. But then I just want to sort of
Very quick one, it's just something maybe to consider. We talked about the impact analysis that needs to be done. We talked about some of the additional, more transformative thinking that has to take place. The combination of that could be that we go into some kind of strategy refresh, and this is only just my opinion. But in my view, and boards that I've worked on, the strategy is that North Star. So if that North Star needs to be slightly adjusted, then I think it'd be good to do all of that work together and sort of just keep pointing towards an objective, which is our strategy. It's just something.
Yeah, I I think we should consider that, but I also think we need to remember that the reason that this is such a big piece of work is the level of engagement and the social months. So whatever adjustment we need to make needs to be in line of learning and understanding and changing context. So that's the only narrative I think would be acceptable into our partners and the organisation. But absolutely not.
Really quickly, I think it's just going back to the 39 goals. There's a lot there, but again, if you look at clinical services, sort of selfishly, 9 here that on the report, you know, there's a lot of work that's going on, and there's a lot of clinical services. You think about the divisions, you know, so, you know, trying to get them down, I think it was double that, but we consolidated, pulled them together and sort of, you know, really refined them. So again, it goes back to Roshin's point around the engagement has been really backwards and forwards. And the engagement has been sort of grassroots. It's not just been sitting in a room on our own pulling these together. So, you know, and I think they are right. They are, some of them are nationally set, you know, around our transformations. Others are sort of, you know, to work through our risks, our demands. So I think they're good. I think, you know, and again, we're, you know, achieving or working towards achieving a lot of these. And they're not just this year. There will be sort of, you know, years going forward as well. So, yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that, you know, very, very proud of the engagement event we did, and with our experts by experience there, it felt this is really good, you know, and a real challenge in the room. So again, setting those goals for this year, with our experts by experience around this is what we think we need to be doing as an organisation as well. So, just wanted to share that.
Brilliant, thank you. I think what is very clear. It is an excellent and it's a very good piece of work that's been taken in, and obviously Kathy's needs to be congratulated and putting all of this together as you can see as well. It's great, but obviously from the discussions that we've had, there just needs to be some further reflections just to give the level of assurance to us, Ned, and also I think what Patrick has properly, which is to work alongside the chairs of the committee. I think that would also be quite advantageous as well to do that, and taking on board the comments which we made earlier to reflect the discussions that were held at committee meetings in this document. But I just wanted to finish off by saying it's a really good piece of work. Okay.
We know we're already on that, but I think we've posted that both last morning with our staff story. The arrangement had been in both Wilson and Vanessa, but also 2 other members of staff, Sandra and Amy, will present, and they have been here since before. So I'm not sure how we managed to get ourselves into a position where we can ultimately go brought into the room, but they are still here. So I'm not sure.
Two different stories.
It was from our delays, so it's the idea was secure care.
Okay.
I